So hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled How Using Personas Has Helped Amey Design Better Fiori Apps. This is the fourth in a series of short webinars in which we are looking at Fiori-based solutions to business challenges. In your meeting invitation, you will find links to the previous webinars in this series. My name is Chris Scott and I'm the Business Development Director at Arch. Arch is a software company specialising in SAP user experience and process integration. I am delighted to be joined today by Jennifer Davis, our Director of Product Development, and by Simon Pennington, who is a Group Information Architect at Amey. We are recording today's session, which should last around 30 minutes, and we will be happy to make the recording available to you all afterwards. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A section on your screen, and we will address them at the end of the session. So now I'll hand over to Jen, who will take you through the slides. Please go ahead, Jen.
Thanks for that, Chris. So today we're going to take a look at a Fiori app that we developed for Amey using our Fiori accelerator platform, Stalo. The app itself is used for goods and services receipting, and the particular focus today is going to be around how we used personas to really great effect in designing and in delivering that particular app. So we're first going to take a look at what the challenge was, then at the approach that we took in terms of our use of personas, and then finally we'll take a look at the app itself to hopefully demonstrate the impact that had on ultimately shaping the app. Okay, so what was the challenge then? The objective was really quite straightforward. We had to build an app that could be used for receipting of goods and services. We had all the usual challenges that come with any project, limited time, budget, resources, but there were some other important factors that we had to consider as well that were specific to this engagement. Firstly, this was Amey's first experience of Fiori and of Stalo, and this was one of only 2 custom apps that were being developed as part of the initial rollout, together with a couple of library apps. So future adoption and how receptive people were around Fiori as it was rolled out more widely was very much dependent on this going well. Scalability of technology is obviously going to be crucial. Implementing individual apps moving forward, it absolutely has to be cost effective, but there is still significant investment required in the technology upfront in your SAP landscape. So as I say, there is a big investment, very important from a business perspective to get that right. There's also a really huge strategic focus within Amey around mobility, definitely being regarded as one of the keys to business transformation. So proving this to be a really solid foundation for that strategy was extremely important. And all of that sort of together meant there was a very high level of visibility and scrutiny of the program at the most senior level within the business. So the challenge wasn't really just to build an app. The challenge was to build an app and get it right first time. So one of the key ways in which we ensured that we did just that was through the use of personas. So what exactly is a persona? Fundamentally, it's just a way to get the team to empathize with the end users, to bring them to life essentially. When you're actually building up the persona, there are very obvious elements that we need to include: what they do, what their goals are, what their pain points are, etc. And those are the things that tend to be the headings on any persona template that you might use. But ultimately, the users are more than just those facts. They're not just black and white, and so it's really key that we capture those sometimes maybe less tangible aspects of the user's character, but although they're less tangible, sometimes they're actually the more important characteristics. And those are the kinds of things that you'll often find threaded through the narrative of the persona. They won't just be stated as facts. They're the things that you pick up and help you get the sense of the user. So ultimately, the success of the persona comes from the believability. If you don't really get the user, then you can't empathize, and we don't have that an effective persona, one that's going to really work for us. So why use personas at Amey? There are a whole variety, of reasons to use personas in designing and delivering apps, but there were a few particular reasons for using them at Amey. First one was around building consensus among stakeholders. Personas are a fantastic tool for making sure that the entire team is on the same page about who this app is actually being built for. And they're a really great point of reference when it comes to resolving any disagreement around design decisions quickly. The personas have the last word essentially. And since time was a factor, that was a really great win. Oftentimes, there's a temptation to focus on the exceptions when designing solutions, planning for every possible eventuality. And while some of that has its place, certainly, personas keep us focused on where we can add the most value to users, and where we should be investing valuable time and effort. Again, time and budget both being important, this was really invaluable. And finally, personas are a really easy way for absolutely everyone to quickly identify with the users. So they're not something that's kind of limited to the design where people are locked up and define the blueprint. So if we take the development team, for example, if we've shared the personas with them, we tend to get much less in the way of questions during the build, or if assumptions are made, they tend to be much more informed. We get less test issues coming up, and typically less by way of change requests, even during UAT, because people really understood where the app was coming from, so it was better designed and better implemented. And where we do get issues or change requests coming up in UAT, it's often easier to push back or decline on those if you refer back to the persona and keep that focus. So they really underpin that ability to get it right first time. I suppose in summary, I'd say that personas and other UX tools are sometimes considered as luxuries when it comes to designing and implementing solutions. But from my perspective, certainly there's a really clear bottom line business case for employing those kinds of tools and really setting yourself up for success. So how did we go about crafting the personas at Amey? And I use that word crafted quite purposefully because of what I said earlier. There's a lot more to the persona than just those basic facts. So we followed a three-step process, which began with a workshop where we explored who the users really are. We talked through who actually does goods receipting, goods and services receipting currently, the frequency with which they do it, types of things they receipt, some of the issues they have, etc. And challenging the assumptions and thinking more broadly was a really important part of that exercise, because what we found was that one of the target users wasn't actually even on that list of current users. So definitely a sort of thinking outside of the box exercise. And this exploration phase, that enabled us to define that core group of users for which we were then going to go ahead and create personas. 3 to 4 is typically what you'd be aiming for, so that you've got good enough coverage but without diluting things too much. We didn't have access to sort of real end users given the timeline, so although that's ideal, we did have an absolutely fantastic group of people in the room who were really closely aligned with the real end users and really understood their nature very well. So in the same workshop, we actually moved on to the define stage. And that's where we really start to bring the personas to life. I'd say everyone tends to be a bit coy at the beginning, shy about getting their user hats on, especially I think because personas are ultimately based on stereotypes, which isn't necessarily seen as a very PC concept these days. But irrespective, it definitely didn't take people long to get into full flow, and ultimately I was kind of struggling to keep up as everyone really got into character, and we really fleshed out each of the personas that we were working towards. And finally, the next step is then just for me to take away all of that great material and consolidate that down, so we have a one page that completely encapsulates each of the personas. Everyone, everyone left the room that day knowing exactly who those personas were. They knew the user really well. So it's not a case of documenting things, for review the way we might do with requirements. It's not a kind of review and circulate, etc., to make sure we've captured them correctly. It's primarily about making sure that the persona could communicate to anyone that hadn't been in the room that day exactly who we were designing the app for. So every single word on that one page is important. So let's meet the team. So I'll introduce you to Pete, Nicola, Martha and Derek. Each of them is a current user of SAP GUI for goods and services receipting, with the exception of Derek here on the end. Pete and Nicola, they're very much occasional users, and they do things like receiving office supplies, or maybe they might have some third-party services, or maybe a marketing expert or something like that come in. Martha, on the other hand, she's more of your sort of receipting super user. She knows MyGo and ML81N like the back of her hand. She does volume receipting on behalf of all of the Dereks of the world. They regularly travel into the field office where Martha works, with all of their paperwork so she can process things. So it's tempting to build a fantastic app around Martha. Surely if that's where the volume of receipting is happening, that's where the most efficiencies can be gained. But what the exploration highlighted was that Derek was actually a huge opportunity. What if we could build an app that serviced all of our current users, but which also gave Derek the ability to do his own receipting out in the field? No more sort of wasted time traveling back into the office. Receipting would get done in a timely way while Derek still had the paperwork to hand. So suppliers were kept happy. There weren't issues with invoicing or whatever it might be. That would be the revolution that would really prove this is the right technology on which Amey could build its mobile strategy. So we don't have time to sort of delve into all of the personas today, but we're going to take a little bit more of a look at Derek. So the facts around Derek are all pretty obvious, and I won't really labour those too much today. This captures the basics of Derek as I described earlier, but what I will pull out are maybe some of those next level aspects of Derek that perhaps are a bit more subliminal. So one of those was the user's motivations. Nowhere in the persona does it mention that Derek really cares about his team, and that looking out for them is one of his key motivators, but it is in there. So Derek's bio, it highlights that he's got a real sort of reluctance around embracing new technology. But his statement of needs, if we look at that, it sort of points towards a desire for a technological solution to his stated pain points. So why the contradiction? If we look further at Derek's needs, they're very much centered on improving efficiencies, which he also then refers to in his quote, linking efficiencies and jobs. And Derek himself is coming more towards the end of his, of his working life. He's very much his concerns are clearly focused on people who are still going to be there in the longer term. And there are lots of other facets, to Derek's personality hiding in here too. A lot of time and effort has definitely gone into making sure that this really gets to the crux of Derek. But the power of the persona is that actually we don't need to flag those things up. They're absolutely implicit in that sense of Derek that you get from reading through the persona. So I suppose the ultimate test, of how good the personas were is in how successful we've been in the app. So I'm going to pass over to Simon just at this point so we can actually hear what Amey think. So all yours, Simon.
Thanks, Jen. So while I log in to show you the app, I think it's from an Amey's perspective, being one of our first forays into a very critical user experience type-based program. Personas had a huge impact in terms of, I went to so many meetings, so many discussions with Arch, without Arch, and all we had to do was mention two words, Derek and Partha. Everyone was on the same page. So from a delivery perspective, just huge. So very much the standard look and feel of Fiori Launchpad. The particular one in question is the seating. So a lot of the principles around the final app was around streamlining the process, and through the personas sort of workshop and themes that Jen has alluded to, the amount of time spent receiving additional MyGo and by combining that into one app, and also decluttering screens into a far more user-friendly pre-built history list in terms of what's open to be receipting, what rather than them having to go look, and just making it nice and easy from a touch screen in terms of swipe left, swipe right for receipting. But anyone that knows the old transactions and then looks at this, the declutter is in the 90%. But when we also looked at what the critical information from an ERP perspective, we're able to deliver 100% of that through this very simplified design principles based on the Derek persona. So delivery day, yes, I want to accept it. Maybe I don't want to accept the services. I can amend it. It's literally that simple. And it's an unbelievable amount of click reduction, which I think Jen's going to do. But fundamentally, the outcome of this, the success of this, is purely based on everyone thinking about any discussion. So yeah, I would probably recommend Personas activities for anyone under. And that's the app. Back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Simon. So in terms of results, this is the kind of level of improvement that we saw in terms of clicks and keystrokes and level of effort. The app is just about to go live soon, so we'll be exploring the wider results or the wider improvements that we've seen moving forward. But these are the things that are definitive. These are the things that are black and white for now, in terms of what the user's interaction is with the app itself. As Simon said, huge reduction in the number of clicks and keystrokes, absolutely enormous compared with what we would see in SAP GUI, and that's sort of the basics of it in terms of what the user actually has to do. But what the level of effort shows as well is that all of that sort of decluttering has really helped the user focus in on what's my task at hand, because lots of the wider information in SAP GUI is absolutely irrelevant to someone who's just going in to do a basic receipting. So we've seen a fantastic improvement in that. Definitely has helped achieve what we were looking to do, and really speaks to the personas, especially if we think about someone like Derek, who is out in the field, he's on a mobile device, he wants to just get straight to the crux of things. Absolutely really pleased with the outcome, and really visible kind of return in terms of the effort that we put into personas. That's we've got the fruits of the labour, as it were, with that. So Derek's contribution. As Simon said, the entire team talks about Derek and Martha and all the other personas that we built, so with Pete and Nicola as well. When we talk about about the app in design meetings, or when we've been having sessions during UAT to run through defects or questions or whatever, Derek is always mentioned by name. We never talk about end users in that kind of generic sense, or Martha is talked about, because this is an issue that Martha would really care about, whatever it might be. So they've been a really strong presence right through, not just a sort of a design activity that's done up front and then forgotten about. It's really worked all the way through. Also designed by Derek, or by the other personas. This was really nice to have that clear decision maker or decision makers in the room, because there wasn't really an opportunity to push back and say, well, no, I want this or I want that. It's, well, what does Derek want? What does Martha want? What do the other personas want? So we had that decision maker and we had that kind of decisive approach. And at the end of the day, it enabled us to meet that challenge. Derek and Martha, Pete and Nicola, they kept us on track. They made sure that we made the right choices along the way and helped us to get to this point now where we feel we've really got it right first time.
That's fantastic. Thank you both very much. We do have time for one or two questions, if there are any, and so you could use the Q&A pod at the bottom of the screen if you have any questions, and we'll see if we can get to them. I see just one at the moment there. So did the design phase take longer because of this personas approach? So I don't know who would want to speak to that. Maybe Simon. How did you find that approach?
So actually the opposite. The design phase was much quicker than any traditional agile waterfall project delivery methodology we've ever used. And I think the rationale and the reason behind that is because everyone talked from the same place, and that's what Persona did. It culturally moved everyone into speaking from the same place, and actually from a design perspective, that shortened the design. So no, I think it had a very positive impact, and I'll go further than that and actually say it's had a positive impact, almost wider than this particular this app. That actually Amey now very much user experience is one of the key elements, and Derek is now used elsewhere.
Great, thank you. So I see no more questions. So thank you everyone who joined us here today. We'll follow up with a link to the recording of today's session and send you an invitation to the next webinar in the series, which will be entitled Deploy Business Apps More Flexibly with Fiori as a Service. You can find more information about Stalo on our website, archglobal.com. So I hope you can enjoy us again. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.